This is Andy Orm. I'm with O'Reilly, and today I'm talking to Ann Wright and Candide Kembler, who are working on a couple of personal health projects, BodyTrack and FluxStream. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about BodyTrack because that was sort of the origin and the idea that expanded into FluxStream, right?
Actually, the BodyTrack and FluxStream both started independently of each other, and then this spring we found each other and realized the synergy and joined forces.
So talk a little bit about BodyTrack and what it's accomplishing, what kind of data it uses.
So BodyTrack is a project at the at the Create Lab at Carnegie Mellon University that really has a mission of empowering people to track their own health situations. And so we've been developing both technological and cultural platforms in order to move society in that direction. And the idea is, when you've got somebody in the situation like I was a few years ago, where they have health problems that come up negative on all the tests, and they kind of come and go, it feels like there ought to be a pattern. How can you make tools to help them be able to capture the information and reflect on it so that maybe they can find answers, if the answers are there, and evaluate strategies that they think might help?
There are a lot of different things that can feed in and you can correlate them.
Yes, indeed. So there's automatic tracking systems. So, for instance, body media armband here, Zeo sleep monitor, things like that. There are also self-report apps. For instance, we use one called MyMe for being able to report things that can't be detected automatically, like headaches and such. And then also contextual information of various sorts. And it brings it together on a common timeline to make it explorable and zoomable.
And I understand that doing this helped you to find a dietary change that sort of fixed your problem.
Actually, I figured out the dietary change before we started building these tools. We're building these tools in response to the fact that I figured it out with tools that were just not adequate at all. Things like Google spreadsheets, typing stuff in, and just really, really hard to visualize.
Yeah, so the next generation of people will really have 21st century tools to help them figure their out.
That's the idea.
Well, let's move to FluxStream now. And what's the purpose of FluxStream?
So FluxStream is mostly a visualization framework. So we do aggregation of all these different data sources. So they can be health related, but also more general purpose. We can aggregate geolocation or Twitter feeds or mail, all sorts of stuff. And what we provide is a way for users, developers to create different visualizations around this data.
And I understand that things would be easy if the device manufacturers used standards and all your data was the same, but you have to do a lot of conversion.
Yes. So, for instance, one thing that is surprisingly difficult to do is to settle on time zone management. So that's one thing we spent a surprising amount of time doing, just harmonizing the time-based information so we can show it in a coherent way for the user.
So, and you were saying one of the goals is that someone may change devices as they find their needs change, and you're hoping that the data will look the same so they can use longitudinal data even as they change the device that captures it.
Indeed, since the aggregation platform allows the import of data together and to be able to reflect on it in a common place. Let's say that, for instance, you were using a free sleep app and that you were aggregating into the system, and then you change to use a Zeo, which gives you higher fidelity data and information on things like deep sleep that you didn't have before. By having it all in a common aggregated place with FluxStream, you don't have to go from one silo to another silo where you've lost your history. It's all still there.
And what's your format? Are you using JSON or some binary format?
So we store the data in a database, but we then provide a way for developers to access this data through JSON, indeed.
Okay.
And actually, so all of the data goes into the database, and then data which is amenable to being explored, like numeric data especially, is also fed into a secondary store we call the data store, which actually does a tiled interface, and that's what supports the fast zooming between years and down to seconds.
Do you expect people to maintain their own databases, or do you provide something in the cloud?
So the meaning of the purpose of the project is to actually provide tools. So the project is completely open source. It's meant to be easy to install. I mean, as easy as possible to install. And we have intentions to provide a cloud-based service, but it is more for demo purposes. So the focus is really to provide tools that are easy for people to fork and to turn into something that makes sense for them.
Okay. Well, I'll just ask one more thing. You explained to me a vision of people also sharing their data to look at a higher level of aggregated research.
Yes, we've actually been working with several groups, including Open Health and Personal Experiments, to look at how do you take data that is useful to the individual and then bring that data from multiple individuals together for various social purposes. So, for instance, Personal Experiments allows people who have their own self-tracking data and have a particular experiment in mind that they want to try to say, hey, let me import the data perhaps from FluxStream, perhaps from the vendors themselves, and be able to bring that together for a whole group of individuals doing the same experiment and be able to compare results.
Thanks a lot for talking to me today.
Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Fascinating.